Wendy Lipton-Dibner, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be with you.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Connecticut. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about how leaders build impassioned engagement, unrivaled loyalty, and boundless growth by measuring real world impact. I love this. The world of impact work is a passion of mine. It's something that I spend a lot of time and energy, thinking about, trying to implement. And there's a lot of different ways to think about impact in terms of social impact, in terms of leadership and organizational impact. Ultimately, we're going to tackle a lot of that, or at least try to, in what we unpack and discuss together today.
Perfect.
As we get started, I wanted to share Wendy's bio with everybody. Wendy Lipton-Dibner is author of What Matters Most: How Leaders Build Impassioned Engagement, Unrivaled Loyalty, and Boundless Growth by Measuring Real-World Impact, and is the leading authority on organizational development through strategic and operational impact. A multi-time best-selling author, sought-after strategist, and serial entrepreneur, she is known for her unparalleled ability to help organizations increase profitability by maximizing and capitalizing on the real-world impact they create for all stakeholders. President, founder, and CEO of Professional Impact Inc. She is the developer of the organizational impact strategy, inventor of real world impact metrics, and creator of the companion apps. She has helped thousands of enterprise, healthcare, and small business and nonprofit leaders increase team effectiveness and revenue as the direct result of making measurable difference in people's lives. I could go on. There's just so many cool things about you and all the good work that you do, but I'm going to pause there. Is there anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything we're about to talk about today happened because of an experience that I had as an employee. And I think it's so fitting, and I'll give you some context here. I was working on my doctorate in sociology and social psychology at Duke, and in my,
Woohoo,
yeah,
sociology.
right? Love my Dukies. So, in the middle of all of it, suddenly I got an offer to come and manage a research study for an organization out of a university, so a soft money grant. And it was 1 year. I took a leave, and it turned into a 3 year extravaganza.
Hmm.
Long story short, I was supposed to manage one research study that they were doing to evaluate a healthcare organization. And they decided, they were having so much fun. They built a center of organizational research studies, invited me to stay on. I'm all of a sudden juggling multiple things: healthcare, education, nonprofit, sales organizations, all of these organizations researching how they're doing and what they're doing. It was such an experience for a young kid who had no idea out of school, right? In about our third year, we got an offer from the United States Senate to present one of our studies
Hmm.
for the committees that they were working on. And it was such a privilege, and I was so excited. I was scared out of my mind. And we go to Washington, and there's this panel of all men, of course. And it was so weird for a young girl to be sitting in these things, which we've all seen on TV, so we know what it looks like. The presentation went really well. The questions is what I want to share with you. They
Hmm.
asked a lot of questions about our research. There was nothing to be afraid of. It was a dynamic study, longitudinal. The hospital was amazing. It was everything to be proud of as far as they were concerned. But the senators weren't interested in the
Right.
results. They were interested in the money. They
Hmm.
wanted to know, what are we costing? What are we charging? What is the hospital charging? What kind of money are they making? They were only interested in the money. And all I could think about was the patients. What about the patients? What about the efficacy of the hospital? What about all the work the doctors and nurses and administrators had done to make sure that people were making a new life for themselves? Nothing like that. So when it was over on the plane, it suddenly hit me, there's something really wrong with this. I mean, I was 23. I didn't know anything really about business other than what I researched. But the one thing I knew was, if this was an example of what was happening in the real world, there was something really wrong.
Mm,
If people were so much more interested in money that they were forgetting about why they were doing what they were doing and what the results were for the real people they served and the real people in the organizations who were doing the work, there was something really wrong. So I quit my job. I walked into a bank the next day and I got a loan to build a social laboratory to prove that we could make more money if we focused on impact instead of money. So the bankers were awesome. They were with me all the
mm.
way, and we did it. So I opened up this business. I had no idea about real world business, right? I had been a researcher. I still am. But here's what we found. I hired 12 employees who had never had a job, had no idea what to do or how to do it, which was my goal. I taught them everything I learned at Duke about what people want, about what people need. All book stuff, right? Not real world. And I said, we're going to do this. There's going to be no pricing. We're not going to talk about money. We're going to find out about people. We're going to help people get what they want. We're going to find out what they want. We're going to help them get it. I was so excited. They were so excited. Long story short, by the end of my first year in that business, we had exceeded all industry levels of
Mm.
revenue. It was really just amazing. And everybody was excited about this. I started getting invitations to talk about it. 3 years later, I sold the business. And ever since then, I've still been proving it in thousands of organizations, millions of entrepreneurs online, helping people look at what they're really doing and how they can make a greater amount of money by putting all priority on impact. So that's where we are today.
Well, I love it. I love everything about the background that you just shared, and the philosophy around what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because I completely agree. Like sometimes it feels like you're screaming into the void a little bit, or beating the perpetually beating your head against the brick wall, whatever the metaphor. I felt it when you're doing things that are obviously driving so much good. So from a human perspective, the human case of it alone is plenty of reason to continue, right? Because you're having the impact. But the reality is, if you can help people to understand the connection between that human case and the business case is tremendous too. Like you can accomplish so much more through having the human impact that you're describing, because humans are the ones that drive the business impacts. And you end up having better individuals, better teams, better stuff, better products and services. Organizations run better, more efficiently, more innovative. All of the things that we want happen when we focus the way you're talking about. And there's so much research to back it up. Your own work has demonstrated that. There's so much other work out there that goes right along with it and complements it and demonstrates that yes, this impacts. I actually thought when you were talking about Congress, I thought you were going to go not just into the money, but into just the political agenda side, like
Oh,
which can get
don't
so
get me started.
frustrating because it's like they don't even ask questions that are relevant to what you're doing. They're trying to get their soundbite for the news or drive whatever political agenda they may have. And in that case, it's Congress and you almost expect it, right? But the reality is we find ourselves in similar contexts daily, in the organizations we find ourselves in, because people are human, because organizations have politics just every bit as much as
Mhm.
thriving and complicated as Congress, and the national level politics. And so we as change makers, we have to learn not only the good science behind this, we need to learn how to do that science well, and so we can drive good impact. We also need to learn how to be good communicators. We need to learn how to be influencers and generate buy-in. And we need to help people connect the human and the business together so they can really see that these outcomes are for everyone's benefit. Uh, that sounds wonderful, but it's so hard to do. And so that's what we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about together today.
Right. I love your passion. I love your passion about this. And one of the biggest challenges that I see is that people are afraid to express that passion.
Mm,
The research, the latest research that actually led to the book that we're going to talk about is I was tired one night. I couldn't sleep for anything. I started scrolling social, and all of a sudden, there it was, people having conversations at 2 o'clock in the morning, expressing the passion that they weren't expressing on the job, talking
mm.
about how much they hate their job, how much they want to leave, how much they hate their boss, all that kind of stuff. But in the replies to those posts is what came an inspiration to me that I never looked back. So what they were talking about is, you know, I hate my job. I hate my boss, but I would stay if I knew that what we were doing was at least making some kind of difference.
Right.
And that thread went into thousands of posts that talked about what it would mean to them if they knew their job had meaning, if they knew what they were doing mattered, if they knew that they were making a difference. And one of the things that I find over and over again, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is that people use the impact word so much
Hmm.
that it's lost a lot of power. One of my first books, I talked about a definition of impact, that it's the measurable difference we make in people's lives as the direct result of us, our team, our products, and our services. But at the bottom line, it's the direct result of contact with someone or something. And if we do it on purpose, you can plan that impact. And that's what I've been doing for 4 decades. I don't announce that to everyone, only for you. But at the end of it all, the reality is that when we measure impact, we have the chance to prove it, to prove to the people who are doing all the work that this is what's happening because of what you're doing. You mentioned impassioned engagement. The impassioned engagement, in my experience, comes when they find out the proof that every single thing they do leads to that. It changes everything for them.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's dive in to the book.
You bet.
Let's talk a little bit more about what you're hoping to really convey to readers. When I sit down with authors, I always want to know like why this book, why now? You've been working, in the space for 40 years, as you say, and all these experiences, other books. So what is it about this topic in this book now?
It's the timing more than anything else. It's the timing. So I've been helping leaders and employees to measure impact for all these years. And here's what you do. Do this survey, do this interview, talk to people, right? Standard analog kind of stuff. Doing seminars, speaking, holding retreats, the whole typical speaker consulting thing. But COVID changed everything.
Hmm.
And in many ways taught leaders and employees that they needed more. I had one person who specifically nailed it for me when he said, if I'm going to risk my life to go to this job, it
Hmm.
needs to matter.
Yeah.
And that inspiration, just hearing the terror in his voice, is really what got me going. And I realized we can't do it the old way. First of all, there's no time. There's no time for all of the consultants and speakers who have been on that trail with me. We all know it's getting harder and harder to be able to get organizations to sit their people down and take a seminar, let alone send them to a retreat, right? So it's not that that's not happening, it's that it's less and less practical, especially with economic uncertainty and layoffs and all of these things that are happening, everything that's on their plate. They don't have time for a seminar. So the question became, can we prove their real world impact, which we should probably define, but can we prove their real world impact without them having to do any work at all, without having to add anything to their plate? And so, of course, that meant tech. So I designed a system that would enable them to do it in analog because I'd never really taught the behind the scenes stuff. So that's the book. And then in the book, it walks you step by step how to measure real world impact, how to do it with your employees, how to use it to create impassioned engagement and boundless loyalty and all that good stuff. But at the end of it all, the reality is very few organizations have time for that. So then came the tech. And I created the technology to match the system, patent pending for a system, technology, and interface. And now we've got both for them. So if they want to do it in analog, they can. If they want to have it done for them with the technology, it's done. Either way, the goal was to get this information out so they could see how simple it is to be able to just build it all without having to do the work. And it isn't just about internally, it has to be about externally, right? So if your stakeholders are having this impassioned engagement and such loyalty and they only want to stop with you, that helps also.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about, well, you mentioned first the defining impact piece, so we should do that. But let's talk define impact as you frame it, and then talk a little bit more about how this technology can be utilized within organizations. Because, like you said, time is perhaps the scarcest resource that we have, and the rate and pace of change is so exponentially rapidly increasing,
You bet.
that it seems like time is that resource of time is shrinking even more. So yeah, first tell us what you think in terms of impact definition, and then how the tech can be utilized within that kind of tension.
Right. So the first question is what happens next? That's the bottom line. You've got to know that the planned benefits of any product or service go on beyond anything we measure typically. So if you buy a product, you know what you're supposed to get from the product. You get from the product, good, they got the product. 5 stars, we're happy, let's sell someone else. The question that I've always had is what's the ripple effect? The classic pebble in a pond. So
Hmm.
if the product is the pebble, then what happens after that first impact, after you get the planned benefits? That's the piece that we're studying. That's the piece that all the research is about. And at the end of the day, what I found is that real world impact, in other words, what happens in the real world when people are out there using your product after that initial impact of your planned benefits? The answer is a lot happens. People change in response to great products and services. It
Hmm.
affects so much more than manufacturers and sales professionals are ever told. It becomes a piece of research and development and innovation when you begin to realize that there are actually 5 components of the impact that you create, and those are the impacts that we need to pay attention to. So the initial impact is what happens right after they receive your plan benefits. The next piece is what happens next. And those are classic, what we're calling impact ripples, right? So stay with the
Hmm.
metaphor. So what happens next, and what does that lead to, and what does that lead to? And each little change, outcome, experience, difference, event, each little thing that happens that never would have happened if they hadn't used that product is measurable.
Hmm.
And when we measure it and we ask people, okay, fine. So this is the impact that you've discovered, this impact ripple, woohoo. Now, how important is that to you? And we measure the importance. And once we measure the importance, we say, okay, so let's see where it really came from. Was it from the product or service, or was it something random in your life? And we help them identify the causality. And when they see those 5 components, right? The initial impact, the impact ripples, the impact importance, the causality, the 5th component becomes which area of their life did it affect?
Hmm.
And we look at all multiple 12 different life areas and we say, okay, where is that impact ripple hitting? And what we begin to find is the classic thing that everybody wants, right? We literally change lives and we can prove it. It makes sense in healthcare. Does it
Hmm.
make sense in sales organizations? Well, first of all, the healthcare people told me the first time I told one of my docs about what I was planning, and he didn't even let me finish my sentence. He's like, "Will you do me first?" And what we talked about is the fact that all of healthcare, they work and they work and they work and they went into healthcare to make an impact in the first place, but they never really get to see what happens next.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing in sales organizations, certainly in nonprofit organizations. They get to see some change, but they don't get to stay around long enough to find out what happened next long ago. So you delivered all of this clean water. Awesome, fabulous. What happened next? So
Mhm.
each thing that comes, the question becomes who can give us that truth? And that truth has to come from the customers, the beneficiaries, and the patients. And so that's the thing that brings it all together to create that unrivaled loyalty because everyone is asking the same question together. What happened next? And how do we prove it?
Hmm. Yeah. And everyone wants to have a very clear why behind what they're doing. We're social animals and we are and purpose driven animals. Like
Mhm.
we need that in our lives. So like Simon Sinek's classic, The Why of Work, for example, there's nothing super groundbreaking in that book. But it's powerful because it reminds everybody of something that's so fundamentally important and essential to each and every one of us. Like
Yeah.
everyone wants to do things that matter. They want to do things that make a difference. Sometimes we're willing to kind of sell our soul a little bit, quote unquote, to sacrifice purpose for money or whatever. And sometimes that depends on circumstance and life stage and whatever. But really, by and large, humans want and need purpose and fulfillment and that is what this impact drives. You can't fully sense the fulfillment, the meaning, the purpose if you don't know what you're doing, why it matters, how it impacts those around you, right?
Yeah, and everyone knows that, right? And so they measure it, but the measurements that they typically use are very limited. Again,
Yeah.
they don't have the time, they don't have the resources. So at the end of the day, getting the long-term ongoing effect of your work has never been accessible until now.
Yeah. Well, and it's just hard. The longitudinal effect, right?
Mhm.
Of tracking impact over time is something that frankly most people aren't willing to invest in.
Well, that's
Even
it.
though we know that when we can show that, it's going to drive, so many really great positive things. So maybe in the last few minutes that we have together, talk a little bit more about the tech piece behind this to help
Sure.
kind of push us in that direction, and then we'll wrap things up for today.
You bet. So the tech piece, real world impact metrics, is the patent. And what we're looking to do with this is make it easy so that leaders can show employees the proof of the real world impact they make every single day in every single department of the organization, giving
Love it.
them opportunities for innovation, using that proof to create new products, to enhance existing products, to be able to create more of what they find out people are reporting as their impact ripples. So the tech has two sides. One is a lovely, awesome game that we give to our customers and patients and beneficiaries. Just play the game. The game leads them to identify the real world impacts they experience in multiple areas of their lives. That, of course, then gets reported to the dashboard. The second backside, the back end, is the magic. It is incredible analytics and reporting capabilities that then put it all together once a week. Leaders get a report, share it with their employees in what we call a 5-minute impact fast to play with it and look at it and celebrate it and decide how are we going to use it. Obviously, they can do more, but they don't need to. And the secret of the tech is to make it that they can do this in 5 minutes a week without any extra work for anyone so that you
Mm.
can use the data to really be able to make huge changes in what's happening, what you do, and of course, what you feel.
Oh, I love it. It's exciting, and I want to check it out more. I note the time, Wendy. I'm going to have to let you go and get on with your busy day. But before we wrap things up for today, I just want to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find more about your team, and then give us the final word for today.
Absolutely. So, the best way to connect with me is LinkedIn or professionalimpact.com. To learn more about the book, you can go to whatmattersmattersmost.com. So there's two matters.
Hmm.
Whatmattersmattersmost.com is the book. And the tech will be actually officially live next week, I believe. And that's realworldimpactmetrics.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so
So
much. It
I
has
will
just
leave
been,
you with one thought as your
yes.
request. At the end of the day, what we've all got to do, John, is never, ever underestimate the power of our impact. When you
Hmm.
focus on impact, the money will come.
Absolutely. It will. When we focus on impact and empower those around us, the the outcomes will far outreach, what we could get by just focusing on those outcomes in and of themselves first and foremost, right? I believe that, Wendy. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Wendy can do for you. Check out the book, check out the tech, check out all the great things. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. They can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.